Hi, everyone. Welcome to Divinity Connecting the Dots. I'm your host, Nivi Jaswal. We're talking about veganism and politics today. And my guest is Sparsha Saha. I'm going to add her to the screen, an empirical political scientist from Harvard University who is probably the only one in her field globally studying animals, food systems, and politics in a way that's evidence based and with a bold and courageous spirit of scientific inquiry. Sparsha, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for that wonderful introduction.
Well, the pleasure is all mine. Let's get right into it. Tell us about your vegan journey.
Oh man, my vegan journey was slow. It had a bit of a, I think, gap in it. The earliest memories I have are, being a young person, a young girl, running around singing. It's all I was doing was singing. But I knew then that non-human animals, non-human beings, were very vulnerable. And whenever I would see a cat outside, and this was in Iran, this was also in the UK. I was in Iran from when I was born to when I was 2, and then moved to the UK and we were there for 10 years. And we journeyed a lot back and forth. We went to India a lot too, as well, when I was young. And I would see animals, and I would just start crying as a young girl. And I think it was because I somehow always knew how vulnerable they are. And coming from an Iranian background, lamb it's very big in the food culture there. And I wonder to what extent there is a history of colonialism and neocolonialism that established that food system there. But Iranians think it's very Iranian to eat a lot of lamb. And so I grew up eating meat, eating animals, and it really took for me a rupture in my family situation, a personal moment where other things were breaking down for me. And I needed to think about who I was outside of the things that I had known that all my entire life. So this was my family structure, everything. And so that kind of was taken away from me. And I had to sit down and think really deeply about what was important to me. And in that process, I went back in time, and I slowly and over the course of a year and a half, I started by cutting out red meat, because that to me, in that stage of my veganism, my baby veganism, I was thinking, well, cows and pigs, they're so smart, they're so wonderful, I can't eat them. So I stopped eating that first. I was eating chicken, and then I learned about chickens and what horrors they go through. And then I thought, no, I can't be a part of this anymore. So I stopped eating chicken, and then dairy, and then eggs went out of the window, and then fish went out of the window. So it took a long time, and there was a big punctuated break between, I would say, my mental veganism as a child, right, and then my practice of veganism as an adult.
Yeah. And oftentimes when people talk about having these realizations as when they're young, as children, obviously there's adult authority around us.
Yes.
And it makes us probably feel less empowered to make that practical step and to really own our choices.
Yep.
I'm curious to know, how old were you when you first realized that this feeling and this core change that you mentioned?
The core change, yeah. So this was, I actually had a vegetarian period when I was I think I was around 23. So I was vegetarian for about a year and a half. And at the time, I was still living with my family partially, because I was in grad school. So I would go home sometimes. And it was a real shock for my parents, for my mom in particular. My dad is Indian, and so he had been raised vegetarian. So I don't think it was completely foreign to him. But my mom said to me, "How are we going to relate to you anymore?" And so I said, "Don't worry, whatever you make, I'll eat the gravy. I just won't eat the So I was making these exceptions, you know, because I just I wanted them to know that they can still relate to me. The things that she makes still are important to me. But I think that's kind of at the base of many families, that kind of food culture in their relationships. But then I stopped being vegetarian, and I started. I wrapped up grad school. I went to LA, where I was lecturing at the School of International Relations on war, on international law, all of those things. Um, and that's really when I started shifting my attention to identity in politics. So I started to study gender.
Yeah.
Um, and the interesting thing about gender in politics is that we take theories from psychology and from sociology, and then we apply them to gender related phenomena. So this could be anything like voters thinking about women candidates or women voters voting. But a lot of it borrows from political psychology. And so I started to also learn about cognitive and social psychology.
Right.
And that actually helped my journey, because by the time I moved back to Massachusetts, and I had had a big personal rupture in my life when I moved back, I think I was also a critical enough thinker. I think
Yeah.
I gained enough information that when I read Carol Adams, and then I was, you know, reading. That was probably the most formative book for me, was reading Carol Adams. I would
Sure.
say I was really ready to accept that there had been a veil that was over my eyes, that was meaning that I was not living in line with my values from when I was a child, when I knew back then.
Right. Yeah. And thank you so much for sharing so intimately, about all of this. Because on the show, when we bring guests and they talk about their most personal experiences, how they've navigated familial, social,
Yeah.
academic, professional situations, and finally, realize that there is no other way except to lead our lives in alignment with our innermost values. Those
Yeah.
stories make a big difference. So you could be changing and transforming somebody's life,
Mhm.
if they were to hear your
Yeah.
story. Um, so please tell us a little bit about your academic journey and what led you to do a PhD.
Hmm. The answer to this question is that, in a way, um, I wasn't being thoughtful at all. The PhD program that I got into was an accident, on my part. So I had intended to go to law school the entire time I was in undergrad. I was thinking, okay, I'm going to go to law school, and then I'm going to go to the UN, or I'm going to go, do something like that. And I so this was the whole plan, and I knew when I would take the law exam, the LSAT,
Yeah.
and I was home for a summer, and my dad actually was asking me, okay, so your law school law, and that's what you want to do, and I was like, yeah, there's this PhD thing I could do. I have to take a test, and he said, take the test, take it. And so I sat there, and our list, well, I might as well, like, I'm planning to go to law school, why not just take this exam? I spent a month studying very poorly for it. Um, I think I was having a very good day when I went in to actually take the exam, because I got the highest score. I'd taken a few practice, and I was like, okay, this is pretty good. And then I took the test, and it was kind of unbelievable what happened. So I couldn't really believe that my score was so good, and I think partly because it was so good, I got lazy, and I didn't want to study for the LSAT. Studying for the LSAT is, I had been blocking out 4 months of my life. I was going to study for a whole year, and really study for 4 months. And I kind of viewed it as my ticket out.
Hmm.
Like, that's my ticket. I'm going to get to the next institution after Berkeley. Again, just not thinking about who I was and what I wanted to do. I was just thinking about, okay, well, I know how to study, and my parents, know me as a good studier, and they like it. So I'm going to keep studying.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, and so I that it kind of just happened by accident. I didn't end up taking the LSAT.
Yeah.
Um, and I applied to grad schools. I got very lucky. I got into a number of them. ended up picking Harvard truthfully because of the name. There was a moment where I was going to go to I believe it was UC, I think it was UCLA or UC San Diego.
Mhm.
And they had an open house, and I was going to go, and I was very interested in some of the people who were working there. And essentially, I was sort of told by family, like, you're not even going to that. You're what are you doing? You got into Harvard. You're going to Harvard.
Right.
And I was a baby. I just said, oh, okay, sure, that's what I'll do.
Yeah.
And so that's really, in a way, I mean, it feels like sometimes I want to, it feels like it would be nice to have a purpose that was driving you from the very beginning, that you knew. There was no purpose that was driving me into the PhD program.
Yeah. Well, I guess that, as I mentioned right before we started and we did our little meditation, as we all, I always do.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
And it when something like, much as we like to believe that we choose our projects or even our relationships, it's actually those projects, those, jobs, those careers that are actually choosing us and
Yeah.
operating through us and
Yeah.
ultimately leading us to our purpose. Um, so please tell us, you've mentioned about it, please tell us a little bit about your ancestry and ancestral food ways that run in your
Mm,
heritage. You mentioned Iran, you mentioned India.
yeah.
What are some of the best or worst of both the worlds
Mm.
that you may have picked up along the way? And
Yeah. So, I mean, I think when we're talking about food, especially when we're talking about food in ancient cultures and cultures that have been in civilizations that have been on this planet for thousands and thousands of years. But when we're talking about them today, as you well know, it's very difficult to figure out what was actually the ancestral food. And so growing up, I thought the ancestral food of Iran was lamb,
Mhm.
um, and so since then I've learned that, that may have been a part of some areas, but it wasn't lamb all the time, as
Right.
much as I thought. And then, with Indian food, it's interesting. My parents, we lived in Iran, and then we moved to the UK, and then we moved to the US. And in some ways, when you have that immigrant experience and you're moving from country to country, especially when it was only just our nuclear family. So we didn't have, we had, my dad had an uncle like 3 times removed living in the UK. And that was our only other family in the US and the UK, was this one other distantly connected, related family. So we didn't have anyone else. And that was the case for many other Indian and Iranian and Nigerian and Egyptian families. And we all kind of lived in the same area, and you learned from each other. So my mom's cooking was I think it became somewhat of a fusion. So even when she's making an Indian curry, I think she's bringing in some of her other skills, Iranian cooking skills, into it. But I remember her learning from our Egyptian friend, Auntie Audette. I remember her learning from our next door neighbors who were Pakistani. So much of my childhood with food was actually realizing, oh, look, they're learning from each other, and they're putting in aspects of what they've learned from each other. So it was always a kind of a beautiful fusion, but a lot of meat.
Yeah, yeah. And food's such a social glue,
Mm,
right?
mm, yeah,
There's no fasting even or fasting, feasting, moments of joy, sorrow that human beings, we found a way to insert food in it.
yeah,
And
yeah,
obviously geopolitics and who would know it better than you, has such a great influence in our food systems, the way we grow, cultivate,
yeah,
what we even define and call food at this point. And you're absolutely right. It's very difficult to even, from an evidence-based standpoint, no
mhm,
matter how hard one digs deep into scholarly work. And even then it depends on the perspectives,
yeah,
through which those neo-colonial, post-colonial, colonial stories have
yeah,
been told.
yeah,
So one has to really sift through and oftentimes one can't tell, lines blur between what your hunch is, between what your motivation might be, and the academic training, professional training
Yeah.
you have received. So it's quite a mishmash. Um, but so let's talk a little bit about um, your journey as a woman of color researcher, political scientist, teacher. You lecture at Harvard, and you've lectured in so many other, institutions, academic, institutions of repute before, and a vegan,
Mm.
a unicorn. So I hope you're aware of that. And having said that, it's a lonely place to be. It can feel very alone,
Yeah.
walking those hallways.
Yeah.
So, and how does it feel to be
Mm.
that person?
Mm. The feelings have varied a lot, I think. I think in this first stage, when I was just awakening to it and just starting to include my work in the internal revolution I had had, seeing so much, learning so much, and I realized as a political scientist, with my work, I have a duty to no one else is doing this. I have a duty to talk about this, to produce research on it, to teach about it. And so in that first stage, when I was just starting to kind of make those connections to my work, what I was pitching courses, I was trying to do events, I think I felt a lot of gratitude for any small little bit of a yes that I would get. And it was very easy for me to discount all the no's. And I had a lot of energy. So even though the hill, it was an uphill battle from the beginning, getting things done. I'm a non-tenure track faculty member too, which adds this whole other level of status and prestige that I don't have. And so, it was an uphill battle, but I had a lot of energy and it was new to me. So I think I was feeling, and it's sad in a way. I was just feeling very grateful for very little things that would come my way that I could then turn into something that would share information or get information out. So that I would say was the first stage.
Mm-hmm.
And then I over time, I was hitting so many barriers that I think the main feeling I had was anger that stemmed from alienation, from not being included. And so this is difficult in academic circles. It's very difficult in academic circles when you're not included, because it means that you don't have as much legitimacy. So much of the academic fields are based on other scholars engaging with your work and wanting to hear about your work, and that wasn't happening for me. And so I was constantly sort of hearing about opportunities, or hearing about, this talk or that thing that happened or this event. And, I would look, and I wasn't invited to any of those kind of academic, scholarly, political science moments where I could share my work, where I could find similarly minded people. Part of this is I'm studying something that really no other empirical political scientist is studying.
Yeah.
So that makes it really difficult. And while I have a few champions, I would say I didn't necessarily have that at Harvard. And so it made my day-to-day kind of very alienating and very like, it's just me against this, it's just me trying to make everything happen that I wanted to happen. Now, I would say in the last, and Nivi, I think so much of this is learning from you, being influenced by you, by your ideas, the way you move in the world. But that has affected me so much that I have a certain peace now when I'm kind of moving through this world, that I kind of just accept it. And I think a little bit that the struggle is actually good, because it makes me better. It makes me a better thinker. It means that I read more. It means that I double check everything. It means that, I just tick off every T and dot everything's dotted. Everything has the details in place because I know that I'm on the edges. I know that there's a struggle, so I have to be extra good. And I think I sort of just, I had another instance yesterday where I got an email and I wasn't included in something for the 1 millionth time, and normally it would have ruined my night. But I saw it. I was disappointed for a moment. I just accepted it. And then I kind of finished my day and I went and I played with my dog and my husband, and we were laughing and making jokes. And I realized an hour later, I told him, I was like, something happened that normally might have in the last, just 2 years ago, it would have ruined my night. I would have been heartbroken for the 20th time. And it didn't. Because I think I'm okay with my little. I'm meeting people like you. I'm meeting other academics, activists, people who I think I'm realizing. Look, these are the people. You are the people that I respect the most, right? Who respect me, who include me, and so I'm making my own center, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And thank you so much for your kind words.
Yeah.
I'm very moved. And being alone, in a corporate world, myself, I can share a little bit. Sometimes you just have to walk those hallways alone, and you have to be the first person dancing on the dance floor, and sometimes outside of the main, circles that you
Yeah.
walk and sleep and talk, and once you start to find those tribes, it's such it's an act of self-compassion, because we
Yeah.
deserve to be with people who celebrate us and not just tolerate us, and who are patient with us, not because they want us to stop talking, but they're patient with us because they're really, really invested and emotionally interested to hear what we have to say, and also because there is a values alignment, that has happened. So I believe that there is a larger scheme, a larger, it's the universe's hand at play. That we walk with the people who don't agree with us, and we walk with the people who do agree with us.
Yes.
And every single one of them has a beautiful lesson and resilience to teach us. You're obviously learning that, and I'm so glad to know that the 20th time your sleep wasn't disturbed and you had a great time.
Yes. You just keep trying, and whatever you accept the universe, because it's guiding. It's very, I view it as a very sort of it's not controlling, but
it's about flowing, right? And then
flowing.
October, when we're talking about this, we're in the season of fall, and it's
Yes.
when even leaves turn into flowers.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Yeah.
So there are sprouts and beautiful ones, which your amazing work and tireless efforts have started to, show. And so you've launched an awesome first ever course called Great Food Transformation on food systems, animal rights at Harvard. I'm going to pull up a little bit about that. We made a graphic.
Aww.
And so this is just, an example, a very limited example of all the different, capstones and projects and, ideas that your students have come out with, courtesy your efforts. Sparsha, tell us a little bit about this course.
Oh, I am so excited for this course that's coming up. I've been teaching a smaller version of it. That was housed in the writing program for the last 3 years. And so this course is very much kind of the next stage that's coming out of these smaller seminar versions. So it's going to be a large lecture course. We'll have 50 students, hopefully even more, depending on kind of what we can manage with community partners who we are working with. And it's the first one of its kind at Harvard that's available for undergraduates. So I feel a responsibility to make this course as excellent as I can. It's, accepting all the flaws that will come with it. But I feel a joy in that sense of responsibility, for kind of leading the way on this issue area that I think will only become, because it will have to. It will only become more and more central, as time passes. And so this course that I'll be teaching in the spring, it really stems. So we'll start by covering the environmental, health, and human and non-human ethical costs of animal agriculture. And so that first part of the course is really to show students that this is an issue area, it's so interdisciplinary. Whether it's you're going to the medical school, the public health school, you're going to environmental science, or you're going to philosophy or ethics or law, it all is part of this issue area. So we'll cover all of those costs in the first part of the course. Then we'll turn our attention to politics. And the main question in politics is, why is this being avoided so blatantly? In the last year or two, I would say we're starting to see little ripples in American politics around this. They're very small, but it's just starting to emerge, and it's mainly from a health angle. In politics in the US. It varies across countries, but one of the questions I have is that health perspective one that may emerge initially as kind of a dominant one? Could be the case. So certainly that seems to be happening in the United States. But in that second unit of the course, we'll cover policy, food policy. So we know the U.S. government heavily subsidizes meat, dairy, which is true across many countries as well. We'll cover the lack of any environmental regulations. So that's also a political issue as well. So really, it's just showing that politics is a big part of this, and much of politics is actively making the problem worse. So we'll cover all of that. Then really the third unit is about bringing in as many community partners as possible to give guest lectures and panels and things like that. And the innovation of the course is, and this emerged because as I was thinking about this course, I realized I would be getting up there every single week, giving a lecture that may be so upsetting to students as we're hitting tipping points that we thought we would hit at +5 degrees Celsius. And the new research is showing that most of these tipping points are going to actually be hit with the current Paris Agreement.
Yeah, at a lower threshold.
At 1.6 to +2, which is what the Paris Agreement is aiming for.
Yeah.
But we're not even on the Paris Agreement scale.
No.
We're heading for 2.6 right now with current policies.
Yes.
And that's even more tipping points. So this is terrifying. This is scary for students, and I knew that the only way I could really do that and not feel terrible, not feel like I was just, not giving them a solution, was to partner with Plant Futures Initiative.
Yeah.
And so they are running a challenge lab that's going to be parallel to the lecture course. And the idea of the challenge lab is to say, hey, students, whatever you're interested in, whether you are more business minded, or whether you're more activist minded, or whether you're more politically minded, here's a community partner, whether it's something like Impossible or JIVINITI, or if it's a political office. We're going to partner you with them in teams, and you're going to help them solve a problem that they're having around plant-based solutions. Right. So that's going to be my favorite part of the course, is just seeing, hopefully, that the students see that they can be part of the solution to this problem.
Right. And it's so relevant at this point in time, right? I mean, when students who are also consumers at large, right, they receive a lot of this stimulus outside of the academic setting, they're not necessarily in a position to empirically, or from a research standpoint, or from a very formal standpoint, study what's happening around them, and that's a big disconnect, which courses like yours are absolutely they're hitting the sweet spot, if I can say that, and offering students a formal platform to engage in food policy or activism or research or anything else, that is just so relevant for them and for their generation. I mean, as we speak, Florida is underwater, right? Hurricane Ian, and it's broken all um, parameters of what human beings have understood about hurricane and hurricane related weather and disaster in the aftermath. What I hear is there people have alligators and they're discovering snakes, as they try to get back into their houses. A third of the country of Pakistan has been underwater, and that is a calamity of a totally different scale. We are seeing climate refugeeism happening, and God only knows the epigenetic impact
Mhm.
of this on pregnant expectant mothers at this point in time, and what the next generation in those countries is going to look like. So courses such as yours are so vital in planting the seeds with young scholars, who are our future, and who will have an interest, and probably they won't even have an option but to study these things more formally. And
Yep.
I know that in a few minutes we will be joined by two of your most amazing students, Kamil Friedman and Naveen Thurpakula, and they're the co-founders of Harvard Plant Futures Initiative. So we'll hear more from Naveen and Kamil about this program. Now, so it is, you mentioned about this popular belief that talking about animal rights and food systems is bad for political discourse.
Mhm.
You are the only empirical political scientist who's really doing quantitative, research and trying to see and run all of those, regressions, et cetera, that, academics like yourself do. And especially when it comes to elections, right? And
Mm.
you've done important work. We have a few, graphs
Mhm.
to show, and I'm going to put it on the screen so our viewers can track along with you, as you explain, your work to us, and
Mhm.
share your findings, Sparsha, on the
Mhm.
screen. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So these are two, and I'll talk you through them. They might be a bit confusing, but these are, I would say, the two main big findings that come out of the work I did. And what I was simply interested in understanding was, is meat, talking about farm animals at the national level, is that vote losing? Because the sense that I was getting was that politicians think it is vote losing to talk about farm animals, or to talk about meat and connect it to the environment. So I was looking and I realized, wait a minute, there is no empirical political science work that actually rigorously answers that question. So I did it. The first step for me was actually to apply to what's called TESS. This is time sharing experiments for the social sciences, and this allowed me to have a probability sample through NORC, AmeriSpeak's NORC panel.
Yeah.
So this for me is the most important part of why this is rigorous research,
Yeah.
is actually the sample that we're using. It's the gold standard in terms of being able to make to have external validity, to make generalizations outside of the sample. It's the gold standard in research. So I ran two sets of experiments. The graph that was on the right is the experiment that relates to the vignette. And in the vignette experiment, so you'll stay, the viewers keep your attention on the right graph. In the vignette experiments, I presented respondents with a hypothetical political candidate who's running for president in America, but at the party in the primary level. So respondents were basically asked, like, consider this politician, but within your party, right? So that's an important kind of aspect. And randomly, respondents saw a control version of a hypothetical stump speech, which brought up the regular issue areas like economy, security, all those things that we're used to hearing about in elections. And then randomly, some people saw a hypothetical stump speech that included connecting the environment to meat. And so in other words, it put political attention on the environmental costs of meat. Randomly, some people saw a different version of this speech. They saw a paragraph that brought up farm animal rights. So I consider this a different framing to encourage reduction of meat consumption, is through talking about farm animal rights. So that was a final version. And then I had a fourth version that included a paragraph that compared that linked the environment to cars. So this one is an environmental issue area that has mainstream acceptance, that has been brought up already in presidential campaigns. So it was kind of another control, another check. What I expected was that the farm animal rights speech would perform the worst among voters. I was expecting, and the way I write the article, my hypothesis is farm animal rights, that is going to be the most vote losing thing you could bring up. That's what I thought. And that's what I think most people would have predicted.
Okay.
And then instead, what you can see on that right graph is, and on the x-axis is the average predicted support for this hypothetical politician. And on the y-axis are the different speeches randomly that each respondent saw. And what you can clearly see here is that farm animal rights, putting national level political attention on farm animal rights, does not lead to any backlash. And this is true for both Republicans and Democrats. This was absolutely shocking to me. I did not expect it. And I think it means we need so much more research about whether we can bring in politics, bring in animal rights into politics. The graph on the left very quickly shows.
Parsha, just because I know you're so used to, discussing all of these different things and so on. So I just want to, if there's a one-line summary of the graph, right, and the shocking finding, would I be correct in saying that regardless of political affiliation in US politics, if a politician were to dare to talk about animal rights, they are not going to receive backlash from the voters?
Yeah, that's what this shows. We need more research. So this is one set of experiments. So I would not feel comfortable saying that for sure until someone independently verified this as well, who was not me. But that's what it shows, and it's a good sample.
Okay. All right. Okay. So very quickly, because I see Naveen and Camille also joined us backstage, and I'll be bringing them on in just a few minutes. But I want to focus on the second graph, which was the second. So I'll bring it on screen.
Yeah. So, and Nivi, thank you so much. I get into academic mode so quickly that I forget sometimes what the main takeaways are. So the one on the left, very quickly, essentially, this one allowed me to manipulate or change the gender and the race of the hypothetical political candidate. So the one on the right was just a white man politician, but the one on the left, I was able to see how voters would respond to Black women, Latino women, Black men, Latino men. And these are, again, same setup, hypothetical political candidate running in a presidential primary at the national level was the setup for the one on the right as well. And this time I manipulated the extent to which they were supportive of animal rights. So high levels of support versus does not support animal rights. I also manipulated what kind of pets they had. And one of the options was to rescue farm animals. So to me, that shows personal concern for farm animals. And then I also manipulated whether they were vegan or not. And so from this, what you see is that Democratic voters give a boost to Black women and Latina candidates who run for president at the national level within their party in the primary. This means, right, that if you're a woman of color, talking about animal rights may not hurt you, and also if you're vegan, it doesn't hurt you as well. So this was the big finding there. It was really just seeing that boost that voters give to candidates of color.
Yeah, that is just absolutely stunning. In conjunction, when you look at both of these findings, one, there's so much food for thought for other, academic scholars, and I really wish and hope that other scholars will take this up and carry your work forward. Sparsha, we have Naveen and Camille, with us. I'm going to bring them on screen. So we're connecting the dots on JIVINITI. We're talking about veganism, animals, politics, plant-based future, and I welcome Camille Friedman and Naveen Durbakola, both sophomores at Harvard University. Camille, you're studying molecular and cellular biology with a minor in dance. I'm so
hmm
curious to learn more about that. And Naveen, you are majoring in nutrition and food policy, and you're both co-founders and co-presidents at Harvard Plant Futures Initiative. Welcome, Naveen and Camille.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yes, thank you so much. We're so honored to be here.
Thank you. I'm going to start with both of your vegan journeys, and I know each of you have had some really amazing experiences. As you've explored plant-based eating and the ethics of veganism. Camille, we'll quickly start with you, and Naveen, you can share your story right after. Camille.
Yeah, so about like 6, 7 years ago, I was having a lot of issues with my digestion and just gastrointestinal problems in general. And I went to a lot of different doctors and for about a couple of years, and none of them could really find out like what was going on or why I was having so much discomfort and pain. And then I was actually at a dance intensive, and the food there was not very good. It kind of grossed me out. Like I saw like these powdered eggs and all this deli meat. And so I just decided after watching a few documentaries on veganism and how it is better for the environment and how it connects to some of my values from like a moral and ethical standpoint, I just decided like overnight to try going vegan. And I felt so much better. Like my digestive issues improved so much,
Wow.
and I had more energy, and I felt like finally like I wasn't in so much pain all the time. And that was about 5 years ago, and I haven't looked back. It's been an amazing part of like my life, and I am very grateful that I have found a solution, and have since been learning more about the environmental sustainability implications and social justice implications of food systems. So just very excited about the future for plant-based. Yeah.
Right. Camille, thank you so much for sharing your story. Naveen.
Yeah, so I started off being a vegetarian for my whole life. I grew up in a community where we were kind of always taught not to harm animals. So I think that I was very fortunate to be surrounded by those ideals. But for me, it was difficult for such a long time to justify why I needed to make that transition to become vegan if I was already vegetarian. But actually, in 2014, I had a run-in with an autoimmune disorder which basically caused me to experience a lot of neurological symptoms that weren't being addressed by the medications I was taking. So what I did was basically look at the dietary triggers associated with the disease, and then I decided to go gluten-free and see if that made an impact. And it really had a transformative impact on my life. And that really, since then, had caused me to analyze the foods I was eating and the effects that they were having on my body, and piqued my interest in the nutrition side of things. And I'd always been very interested in environmental activism and the intersection of environmental health and planetary health and human health. So kind of veganism seemed like the real link between the two.
Yeah.
So about 2.5 years ago during COVID, I decided to make the switch.
That is just awesome. Both of you've been touched personally from a health standpoint. You're actively choosing to shape your academic career and your professional future ahead, and connecting ideas and ideals of public health, planetary health, and doing active research. So Camille, tell us a little bit about your experience in running, the Plant Futures Initiative as one of the co-founders along with Naveen.
Yeah, I've been super grateful to be collaborating with Naveen and Sparsha on running this club. Like they're both amazing, and bring so like it's amazing to have so many people who are passionate about these issues. It's been exciting to see how much enthusiasm there is for plant-based. I think once you find the people who are interested and curious in plant-based food systems, it's automatically builds a great community. We actually recently just attended Veg Fest Boston, and it was a super great event. Like a dozen or so people came, and everyone was having a great time. And even on the bus there, people were just like having conversations about veganism and the ethical implications, and I thought that was really cool. So it's very gratifying to see how we can bring people together over these issues. And yeah, I'm just super excited for our plans for the year and what's ahead.
Right. And Naveen, you are leading so many different diverse initiatives at Harvard. So you lead the Food Waste Reduction Project for the university. You're the co-founder of the Plant Powered Youth Steering Committee. You serve on the Federal Plant-Based School Food Advocacy Coalition. Oh my goodness. And then you've been to the White House conference that's on hunger and nutrition and health. And tell us everything that you can about, first of all, your experience at the White House, and also your engagement across all of these different diverse initiatives.
Sure. Well, first of all, I just wanted to echo exactly what Camille said, in that I'm so grateful to have both Camille and Sparsha on my side and supporting us every step of the way. And this journey really would not be possible without them. So actually, yeah, this past week, I was invited to the White House Conference on Hunger, Nutrition, and Health, which is basically the first of its kind in about 53 years or so, that focuses on ending hunger in the United States. So it's very long overdue. And they were trying to kind of get people from various vantage points to speak and discuss on the issues of hunger, nutrition, and health. And one of the things that I had mentioned in my previous work through the Plant Powered Youth Steering Committee, which is basically a group of students across various high schools and colleges who are passionate about plant-based, is that we need to have more youth representation on issues surrounding food. And specifically, that youth need to be included in the policymaking process, because a lot of the policies and meal programs and various interventions that the government employs largely affect youth populations. So without having their voices represented, then you're not getting policies that are representative of those people. So I think that was a big thing. And the Biden-Harris administration was listening to these sorts of messages, and they heard what we had to say. So they wanted to invite us and see what we could contribute to the discussion. So I was very honored to be part of that. And alongside that, I've been able to work at Harvard more institutionally on bringing plant-based towards our dining halls and towards our community. So the Food Waste Reduction Project is a part of the Office for Sustainability, and we are working on reducing the emissions that come out of food at Harvard. So one of the goals that we've committed to is reducing emissions by 25% by 2030. And we are actually on track to set those goals, and largely because the dining halls are slowly making a transition to being more plant-forward and plant-based. And on top of that, we're really focused on just kind of building a community at Harvard that is supportive of plant-based and wants to see plant-based succeed. And that's where Plant Futures comes in, and what the work Camille mentioned and the work that we are continuing to do is so important, and we're really grateful and honored to be part of it.
Right. And in a minute, I'm going to invite Sparsha as well, and the both of you also, to talk specifically about the Plant Futures Initiative and the Harvard chapter, the vision, the goals, the objectives you have, and some of the work you may have already, done as part of that initiative. I'm going to go over to Camille and tell our viewers about your experience attending and presenting at the Radcliffe workshop on the future of food systems.
Yeah, thank you. So over the summer, actually it was in September, but we had the Radcliffe workshop on the future of food systems, which was bringing together people from across like all different fields. There were doctors, politicians, people, many of the co-founders from the Plant Futures Initiative came as well, to talk about how we can like accelerate the plant-based transition at Harvard. And this was an amazing opportunity to just brainstorm and really focus on this issue, and have time to learn from so many other people about their ideas for making this possible. And I was really fortunate to have been asked by Sparsha and Max Bazerman and Samantha Derrick to work on a survey to kind of gauge the interest in plant-based at Harvard, both in terms of like opportunities with courses and research projects and speaker events and kind of like programming, and in addition to um, the plant-based options within our dining halls.
Mhm.
And so I surveyed over 200 people
Mhm.
and found that a lot of people support increasing plant-based options in the dining halls, as well as like getting more courses and like academic opportunities focused around these issues. So those were really encouraging results. We want to do more extensive surveying in the future to kind of verify them and make the samples more representative. But it's exciting to see that there are a lot of people who are also thinking about plant-based.
Yeah, exciting times, and I was just mentioning with Sparsha before you guys came on that it's so important for us to survey our youth and to understand how is it that they're, feeling outside of the academic setting. And since veganism is something that, younger people in this country are more likely to choose veganism for a variety of different, reasons like environmental health and global climate change, animal rights and ethics, versus some of the older persons, who are probably more motivated from a health standpoint. So, the question that I have for both of you, Camille and Naveen, is as you see the interest in a plant forward future grow on campus, what are some of the specific, ways in which the Harvard Plant Futures Initiative or other initiatives that you guys are individually or together part of, how are you creating enrollment? I bet that when you look at the student body, you'll see a reflection of what's some of the norms and some of the values that are very deeply and closely held by people in favor of animal-based eating. So share with our viewers, maybe some anecdotes around difficult conversations you may have had, some struggles, some challenges that you guys experience, and overall how you're enrolling students to come over to the plant side.
Yeah, sure. So, to all the points you brought up, it's definitely true. It's very tough to kind of create this community amongst a lot of people who have eaten animal-based diets their entire lives, and making a transition, especially in a new environment, can be very daunting. But I think that one of the really key parts of our mission is creating a community, because the retention rate of people who choose to become vegan, maybe for like a week or 2 weeks, or just to see what it's like. The people that actually stick it out are those that have a community that support them and encourage them. So I think our biggest goal with Plant Futures at Harvard is really just to create that foundation for students, and to kind of guide them in that process, to offer nutritional advice through our speakers, to offer personalized advice from students who have gone through the process. A lot of our students that we've been speaking with have even made this transition pretty recently since coming to college. So they understand how it works when you're in the dining halls and you have to use what's available to you and you can't make your own food. So I think that that's something that's what we're really trying to tackle. And the other point, like one of the big difficulties we run into for sure is kind of bridging the gap between the older and younger generations, and seeing what people are most interested in and what is most compelling to people for reasons to switch. And I think with the younger generation, especially students at the college, we see that over 80% of students are super supportive of more climate-friendly policies at the school. And as I'm sure we're well aware of, plant-based is one of the biggest ways to support the climate. So that's one of the angles that it seems to be appealing to a lot of youth. And then, like you mentioned, sort of the health aspect of things and how plant-based diets are proven to reduce chronic diseases and improve heart health, etc. That's been very appealing to a lot of the faculty that we've been trying to get on board. And a lot of people who might have health complications that we think could potentially be alleviated by trying to make some switches and seeing what happens.
So are the faculty open to it?
I think that a lot of them are and a lot of them aren't. So there's a lot of previously, like I mentioned, ingrained beliefs that are very hard to change. So with a lot of faculty, we've seen support in being very receptive to ideas, helping us host events, kind of coming on board to speak. But as far as actually practicing the ideals that we are talking about in their daily lives, that's something that we've seen amongst many faculty like Sparsha, but not amongst a lot of other faculty.
Yeah, yeah, and let's hope that with your efforts, that changes not just within the student body, but also, with the faculty members. Sparsha, if I may call upon you to share with us, more formally around the Plant Futures Initiative. Where did it begin? Is Harvard at the center of it, or did it start somewhere else? Something about co-founders. I heard Camille mention Samantha Derrick. So tell us a little bit about the origins of this project, and how did Harvard come to know about it? How did Samantha reach out to you, or any other way? So
we so Samantha Derrick is a master's student has her master's from UC Berkeley, and when she was doing that, she realized that there was really not much at UC Berkeley to support her interests in her research and her activist interests around plant-based. And she met up with Will Rosenwig, and eventually Nina Gaiman came on board, Gelman came on board, and they birthed Plant Futures Initiative. And so the idea behind Plant Futures Initiative is that they provide initial support and some resources to kind of create chapters in other universities.
Okay.
And the idea is that these are independent chapters that are kind of doing their own thing, but there's a home that can support. And so when we were kind of first setting this up, and I met Sam because I invited her to come give a talk in my class, and she came, and Camille and Naveen were in that class, and they saw her, and I think it was really kind of like a joint, the four of us just realizing, oh, okay, we all really like each other and like what each other is about. So maybe we can do this at Harvard. And I think, the first meetings were me, Naveen, Camille, Sam, Brittany, and it just kind of like slowly grew from that.
Right. And I'm just going to bring up some interesting images, So I noticed Samantha in the first to the top left. And so Naveen and Camille, tell us what's going on in some of these pictures, especially the top right and the bottom left.
Yeah, for sure. So on the top right, that's an image of a recent event we had, a film screening of the Eating Plants TV series. And actually, we had the filmmakers come and talk, and we served all vegan food. And so that's some of the food and some of the people who attended. And that was co-hosted with the Animal Law and Policy program, as well as the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences Food Literacy Project. So lots of cross collaboration amongst different schools. So that's very awesome to see people coming together. And again, on the bottom left, just a picture of people who had attended, and the filmmakers are in that photo as well.
All right. Thank you for sharing that. Naveen, did you want to say something about that? Also?
Oh yeah, no, I was just gonna add for the pictures in the middle. The top middle one, I believe, was us at the Plant-Based World Expo in New York City, and that was, I think, 3 weeks ago. And we had the opportunity to travel there and meet with a lot of different plant-based companies and to hear about their products and their stories and what they're doing in the plant-based world. And that was really inspiring for us. And to just really integrate ourselves into the community and hear from people. And that it was an amazing experience. And then the bottom middle one was, like Camille mentioned earlier, we went to the Veg Fest Boston just this past weekend with a group of people. And it was really cool for those people to be able to see, just even within Boston alone, how much plant-based has grown and how many diverse options there really are nowadays.
Right. And I understand that there's a video of your time at the Plant-Based World Expo. I'll be sure to include that in the show notes. And, so our viewers can also watch it. We have less than a minute left. And Sparsha, I didn't want to, let you go without asking you a question that we'd planned to ask. And I know it's going to be a little bit fun. It's great to have Camille Naveen join us for that too, and hear about what might have been had you not been teaching them at Harvard.
What might have been? Well, in a way, I did try to still make it happen. After I defended my PhD, I went to LA, and part of my aim was to try to make it in the music business as a singer, songwriter, producer. But if I were not a teacher and a researcher, I would definitely be singing songs in all of the local bars around Gloucester. That would be my my goal, my life goal, and I still intend to do it after retirement. So.
Well, don't wait until retirement. We would love to hear, and maybe you can embed, the critical message of public health, planetary health, veganism, animal rights, and the need to transform food systems in our food systems in your
song.
In the song, in your music. I'm pretty sure there's a tribe of musicians out there that will join you and help. Well, this is all that we have time for. Sparsha Saha, Camille Friedman, and Naveen Durbakula, thank you so much for joining us on the show, Divinity, Connecting the Dots. It's been a pleasure talking to you and learning about your tireless efforts at Harvard University in making veganism a reality, because plant-based is the future. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Nivi, for having us.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you.